Marriage and Gender Inequality, Through the Eyes of Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Here is some background on marriage during the 19th century. The reading Marriage, the Peculiar Institution, an exploration of marriage and the women's rights movement in the 19th century, written by Murray Alexandra, looks at how women during this time worked alongside black people to fight for their rights. Marriage was a central topic of discussion for women's rights activists in the 19th century. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, a women's rights activist in the 1800s, wrote a letter to Susan B. Anthony on the topic of marriage. In this letter, Stanton compares marriage to slavery by saying they were both oppressive, stating that married women are denied the right to hold property, the right to keep wages, and the right to custody of their children. The abolition of slavery was another major issue going on. Women during this time worked alongside black people to fight for their rights. Murray states that during the 19th century, by marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. When a woman gets married, they are no longer viewed as individuals, and are instead looked at as property of a man. A step in the right direction. The Married Women's Property Act was passed, and it allowed women some degree of independence from their husbands. Women were now allowed custody over their children as well as the right to own their own property. Charlotte Perkins Gilman explores themes of marriage and motherhood in her works Women in Economics and The Yellow Wallpaper. She combines ideas by economics thinkers like Adam Smith and Thomas R. Malthus with utopian socialists such as Robert Owen and Charles Fourier. Gilman wants to explore the idea of women being resource users, as opposed to being the resource that is used. She believed that women were victims of socio-economic tradition, which had evolved over time, but could be challenged by sound economic reasoning. She hoped that, in the future, women would be free to develop their economic potential, for their own benefit and for the benefit of society. It could be argued that she approached the subject of marriage from an economic perspective, in an attempt to appeal to her audience. Men in power may disagree with the idea of liberating women, but they may not disagree with ideas that better the economy. Gilman believes that a girl serves her child's economic advantage by preparing her for the market. The girl must learn how to be useful, so her education is directed towards domesticity. She must learn how to cook, sew, take care of the house, and learn about essential marriage psychology, ways to ensure a secure future laid in her docility and obedience to the wishes of her husband. She must also play hard to get and make herself difficult to attain. Gilman states that only a woman ignorant of the market mechanism would part with herself, her only economic good, before she is assured of marriage. Gilman believes it is absurd to pretend that, under these conditions, marriage is anything but an economic arrangement, modeled after the free market concept. Once a marriage contract was signed, women became men's chattel. The servile relationship between husband and wife to that of a horse and his master. Horse is dependent on the keeper for food, so it is with the hard-worked savage or peasant woman. Once a marriage contract was signed, women became men's chattel. The servile relationship between husband and wife to that of a horse and his master. Horse is dependent on the keeper for food, so it is with the hard-worked savage or peasant woman. She noted that the treatment of wives was comparative to the treatment of wards, favored slaves and pets. They earned their daily bread by depending on the man she married. She is dependent on how much he has and how much he is willing to give her. She who could best please her lord was the favorite slave or favorite wife, and she obtained the best economic conditions. In the words of John Stuart Mill, there remained no legal slaves, except the mistress of every house. The dependence of women on men was not an original institution which evolved through need, but was the primitive state of slavery lasting on. Gilman denied the idea that men and women share the responsibilities of running a marriage. She declared a wife is in no sense a business partner, unless she contributes capital or experience or labor as a man would in like relation. Women were primarily excluded for any significant decision in family or business affairs. This proves the impossibility of the existence of a marriage partnership. In businesses, partners divide duties of the firm, has equal powers, delineated rights, ability for a partner to withdraw from the arrangement. John Stuart Mill pointed out that in marriage, there is no division of powers related to the capabilities and suitabilities of partners. There is no division of rights, only restrictive conditions that bind the wife in an inferior position. Little recourse for the wife for the dissolution of the marriage partnership. Gilman states that, most men would hesitate very seriously before entering a business partnership with any woman, wife or not. Gilman was disturbed by the idea that a woman's worth was attached to her maternal function. She disagreed with the idea that motherhood was an exchangeable commodity, given by women in payment for clothes and food. If motherhood gave women value, then women who are not mothers have no economic status at all, and the income of those who are mothers should be shown in relative to their motherhood. Gilman disagreed with the idea that motherhood gave women value, as it kept married women bound to their husbands for financial support, with or without children. She also disagreed with the idea that the function of maternity unfits a woman for economic production, and therefore it is right that she should be supported by her husband. The depiction of motherhood in the yellow wallpaper. The yellow wallpaper has been characterized as an unsettling depiction of marriage, motherhood, and madness. In the yellow wallpaper, conventional marriage is presented as a form of domestic and sexual servitude for women. Gilman has previously compared marriage to prostitution, and claims that they are intimately related, and are derived from the same patriarchal logic. The treatment of women in marriages is comparable to the treatment of slaves, wards and prostitutes. They are at the women's mercy of their husbands/owners. The instant a woman is married, she ceases to have any individual status before the law, surrendering her property, sexuality, and legal rights to her husband. Similarly, the narrator in the yellow wallpaper is at the whim of her husband. He is her doctor, prescribing her medications that she doesn't know the name of, and her innkeeper, keeping her locked indoors and away from the outside world. She becomes his property. Liz Keller points out that the narrator in the yellow wallpaper retreats from topic after topic, before going into depth on subjects that she deems safe, acceptable feminine topics. These subjects include the house, her room and the yellow wallpaper. What does the yellow wallpaper represent? As the story progresses, the narrator begins to tear at the wallpaper in an attempt to free the woman she perceives to be trapped inside. She becomes aware of this woman and the other female figures hidden in the wallpaper. She also notes that it seems like that wallpaper has been torn before, perhaps hinting that the room has a previous female occupant who also struggled for her freedom. The patriarchal house is haunted by figures of women. The room itself has trapped various female figures in the wallpaper. The bed is nailed down to the floor and our narrator is trapped by a locked door. The room itself becomes indistinguishable from a prison, emphasizing the ways in which our narrator is at the mercy of her husband. In the final scene, our narrator is physically bound by a rope. Her husband is standing below her, forced to listen to her. She is not free at the end of the story, because she is still bound and locked in her room. This may be a reference to her marital vows. Although her husband is unconscious, he is still alive and she is still bound to him. If I Were a Man is another piece of writing the Gilman published that focused on the liberation of women. In this reading, the main character, Molly, wants to be a man and her wish comes true when she turns into her husband. She now views the world differently and looks at women's hats as absurd, and does not understand how when she was a woman, she enjoyed those big hats. She is also amazed by the pockets and the pants that men get to wear. When Molly gets tickled by the feather on another woman's hat, Molly feels a sudden pleasure from the intimate touch, and this makes her realize that hats were made for a man's pleasure by men themselves. Something that stood out was how Gilman sees this household model as a part of a cycle that needs to be broken. Children see that their dad is the one who goes out to make money only for mom to go spend it. When the children observe this, they will end up doing the same, so it would be this long cycle until a woman becomes financially liberated and teaches her children differently. And this is what actually ended up happening for the most part in this today's world. Charlotte Perkins Gilman is a powerful writer who has critiqued patriarchy during the 19th century. Her writings led to the eye-opening analysis about the oppression women faced and the gender roles women were subjected to. Her writing explores the mental and emotional strain put on women in the 19th century. Gilman's writing continues to bring attention to those women who are still facing oppression due to the patriarchal society we live in.